thank you very much for all of the help that those of you have donated, have given us over the last year. And I wanted to ask for some more help, but I want to read something so I don't leave out. It's very simple. So our SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery has expenses. And here's a little synopsis in a paragraph. Our heating bills were almost $5,000 for January, February, and March last year. Can you help us keep warm this winter? Please help us if you're able to. I want to talk about responsibility, so maybe that's the talk title. Quite often misunderstood. Well, I don't know if it's misunderstood, but it's understood in different ways as being to blame or guilty or all of those relative things. In the relative world, that's quite often used, and even in the Buddhist path, that's also used in different ways. But the way I would like to talk about it this evening a little bit, and I would like a lot of this to be questions so that we can see how you're relating to that, and then I possibly can help you together. We can go deeper into that, what that is. There's a slogan, I think it's number 34, in Atisha 7 Points of Mind Training that touches on that a little bit, maybe quite a bit. It's called, don't transfer the ox's load to the cow. Sometimes it's said the other way around. So don't shift anything around. Whatever shows up, don't shift it to something else. Don't blame. All dharmas are without blame. That's another slogan. So responsibility, or the ability to respond to something as it is. You can't do this with a thinking mind, the processing mind, the analytical mind, the logical mind. Well, yeah, you could, but you're going to come up with just that. Picking and choosing, dividing, categorizing, pushing this down, fluffing this up, blaming that, but this gets off free. What does it say? They say scot-free? I'm not sure why they say that. Is that about Scotland? I don't know. Anytime you pick anything out, you are ignoring all of the causes and conditions that are untraceable, that are arising, that provide you or us, me or you, with this particularity called blame or credit or responsibility in its relative sense. The way I use responsibility, or the ability to respond, is that you'll consider everything that is happening in your milieu, in your area, in your quadrangle, to see what is this fundamentally, not just who did that, who caused this, well, who's to blame for this, who spilled the milk, and all of that. Those work okay to some extent, unless things get really difficult, and then you have World War III. And you're responsible for it. Fundamentally, from the ultimate point of view, which is no point of view, you're responsible for everything. There isn't anything that isn't your fault, and there isn't anything that you don't get credit for. Ultimately. Not something you can think about. If you see this, you might think you'd have this vast panoramic vista of ultimate truth, when actually it's the top of your kitchen table that you need to clean, possibly. So the idea here that I'm endeavoring to say is, give the whole situation a little bit more time, you could say, a little bit more space, you could say, to see more deeply what it is that is arising, that the ego mind is so compulsive about just blaming. As soon as we can get to find out who did this, we tend to do that. We tend to get compulsive about it. So not translating the ox's load to the cow is just about being responsible in the relative sense for whatever arises in your mind stream. Anything that arises in your mind stream is not caused by someone else. It may be triggered by it, but what arises there was already there, already looking for an opportunity to fan out and be some things, somebody going somewhere. I can go further, or I also can answer questions right now if you have them.
She is unbowing.
Yes, sir.
Something I'm trying to understand is how do we take responsibility for something without then blaming ourselves? Bowing.
So you might have to include some of that. But taking responsibility is not exactly responding. It's actually, it is a kind of a blame for yourself. And I'm not endeavoring to promote blaming yourself or blaming anyone. It's like the idea of seeing who did this, who did that, who should have done this. That should have been done by this person. That was their responsibility. That kind of language around that just makes the whole thing spin more and more and more. And the next thing you know, somebody else is taking up your particular banner or what you're trying to promote or shut down on, or using relative truth as if we had some control over something. You might want to go back to square one and say, who is this in the first place? What is this fundamentally? Go ahead, Jason.
I'm bowing. I'm not sure I have a good way of putting this, but how do we take responsibility without empowering somebody to continue to do something harmful? Bowing.
So somebody doing something harmful may need to occur, may need to show up. You or me, we are not that powerful. It's not that we can't stop. If we're right there and something starts to go a particular direction where it looks like it's going to cause difficulty for someone or put someone in harm's way, and the other classical ways of talking about it, respond out of the situation. If it's that clear, respond out of it. But if it's three layers back, where it's vague, where you can't really see the cause and effect, and you want to presume that this needs to be shut down because of that, or you start thinking about it, gathering info, gathering evidence. And this is happening everywhere, and it is not incorrect. It's relatively fine. But on the spiritual path, we have to start somewhere. We just stop blaming everything. The best way to work with this radically, fundamentally, and minimally, when I say minimally, I mean with just the first leading edge of that, this happened, and that's what caused it, is to do it in our mind stream. When the mind stream shows up, we've been triggered by somebody, said something, did something, acted in a certain way, and instead of receiving that, being responsible for what occurs, what that happens to trigger, instead we blame the trigger for how we feel. It's very, very difficult to turn that around and shut it out. It seems that we have to really be aware that we do that before it will subside, or before it will back off, or before, and there's no guarantee that it will happen this year, next year, or in 20 years. There's no guarantee of anything. We have to see it. It has to be awareness, awareness, awareness. You're in as an example, you're in the kitchen, or you're in the dining room, or you're going from here to there, and someone else in your family, in your group, in your community says something, does something, acts in a certain way that triggers emotions or feelings in you, be responsible. Receive those feelings. Receive the feeling that arises in your mind stream that it looks like somebody else might have dumped into you. You've heard me talk about this hundreds of times if you've been around for hundreds of times. So it actually relieves the tension in our mind if we can shift the ox's load to the cow. If we can somehow blame somebody, we put it on someone else, then we get some relief. Well, at least we didn't cause it. At least the reason I'm feeling this way is because. It's a very simple, direct teaching out of ancient times. All dharmas are without blame. You cannot find first cause for anything. It's that complicated. It's called dependent origination. Pratitya samutpada is a fancy word for something that's, we can't figure it out. All we can see is, we look at it closely, and you could even say objectively, we see that it is an incredible matrix of dependent origination, or cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, but no first cause. There was no big bang anywhere. More, Chezan?
Chezan buying, I don't know that I'm clear about that boundary between the practice and the practicality of it. And so, like, an example in a relationship, if there's something abusive happening, to take responsibility for your partner's abuse, what does that mean different from being okay with that, bowing?
So I'm going to go back to the old thing that I talk about all the time, is don't approve, don't disapprove, and don't ignore, the three poisons. Being okay with that. So that's not what I am endeavoring to point at here. This is difficult to put into words because it is so easy to just find blame or say we're not to blame or show how we're not really to blame. That it was, you're responsible for everything. This doesn't mean that you're to blame for anything, but you might be. There might be some aspect of responsibility where you pushed on this or pulled on that, or were shut down in such a way that you didn't see that you perhaps could have stopped a situation or an event that was harmful to others. Very difficult, and it's especially hard if you're in a community where there's no communication. If there's no communication, there's not going to be any cooperation or collaboration. Very difficult stuff. That's why it's a spiritual path, and it takes a lifetime to do this. So more questions. Go back to you, Chezan. I know I haven't clarified anything.
I guess I think I'm still trying to understand what that word responsibility means when it's not a relative, like you are responsible for what is occurring. Bowing.
I'll say it again. Now, this might sound a little corny to you, or my way of backing out of being able to explain it. I can't explain this. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. So the way I am going to endeavor to explain it is when I turn that word backwards and say it's the ability to respond. And how you respond is with the situation itself. And it may look like you're blaming in that situation for 30 seconds or 18 minutes. And it may look like you're driving all blames into one, which is another slogan. I'll be responsible for everything. That's not some kind of heroism necessarily. So the ability to respond, so you actually respond, you see, smell, taste, touch, think, hear, everything that happens. You receive. My way of teaching it is receive everything, make no comment. Receive everything, don't elaborate. Receive everything, don't abandon what you are receiving for what you think about it. And how do you do that? How do you practice that? You have to spend a lot of time noticing that you cannot do that. You just, it's a failure, a failure, a failure. It's just a failure of this body-mind complex, that especially if it's showing up as a personhood, as ego, or somebody that can succeed or fail. Somebody can receive blame, or someone that can stop blaming others. The ego is very eager to get hold of any kind of proof that it's being successful, that you're going to need the ego if you're going to make it in this world. You don't need to have a central authority at all. In fact, then in fiction, the central authority itself will stop you from seeing the completely all-pervasive nature of consciousness. The consciousness has no center, has no fringe.
How can I be responsible if I'm not clear about what's showing up?
That would be it. Be aware that you're not clear and don't do anything. But then if there's an obvious situation that needs attention that you might need to respond to, rather than go in and see, is this going to get me a credential? Will I get in trouble if I do this? If I move in that direction, will that look right to him or her or them? Should I even pay attention to this? Maybe I should mind my own business. Constant conversation in our own mind about what we're doing, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how that will look, what will people think, what will she think, he think, what will I think, what kind of jam am I going to get into if I step across that boundary of somebody's property or something like that. More? Oh, Sean.
How do we not confuse the situation itself with our own projections that we put onto the situation?
Good one. So if it's showing up that you're unclear about what dynamic to take there, because you're not sure if it's a projection or if you're inventing something about it or if it's an actual situation, is that what you're addressing? Don't do anything. But when I say don't do anything, that doesn't mean this. You got better things to do than that. That's too confusing. You can't figure that out. Stay right with it. Keep your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, all of your sense fields right on that. So that you're in what? In receive. So that you're receiving whatever is happening in that situation. And if you're really receiving whatever is happening in any situation, then any kind of response that comes out there's no guarantee, but will be likely to have not be coming out of preconceptions or ideas about it. And it might be more scary than that. You won't have the protection of your preconceptions. That's what preconceptions do, is they save us from really looking at any given situation. More? Mm-hmm.
Divine, what does the failing over and over and over again,
The what?
what is happening? What is when we are, earlier you said failure, to watch the failure over and over again, what we can see, we cannot quite receive it.
That fundamentally, and maybe in other ways, but fundamentally that's the ego mind. Just because you've been training your mind, the ego mind is beginning to see that it cannot solve this. It's failing, and that will happen for quite a while until the final failure, which is there never was a failure. There never was a person, an individual, a consciousness, an ego that failed. That failure feeling is another way of building up the credential of ego. You might have to do that for quite a while. As Trungpa Rinpoche once said, the path to liberation is one failure and after another until the final disappointment, which is liberation itself. And that's not something you can figure out. It's something you could consider more?
Is that failure solidifying the ego, bowing?
A little, but it doesn't matter because it's happening in an open dimension, or it's happening in awareness. Much more room around there than there is a conjunction of something. That's why it looks like failure. It might be success. Same thing. Yes, sir.
Geez, when someone triggers difficulty in me, is it important for me to see the machinations that lead to that difficulty showing up in myself?
Probably. I'm not sure when you talk about that, can you describe, say, a little bit more how they're looking right now? How does it look?
Like there's conditionality.
Oh, yes, yeah, the conditionality's bullshit. Do you want that kind of help? And when I say, not saying, I'm saying it in that way so you understand what I'm saying, because if I say the machinations are unreal, they're unreal because everything that is showing up as out there is unreal. It's relatively real, but if you're going to work with it that way, we might as well just work with psychology, or might as well just work with it in a relative way. I'm okay, you're okay, or some kind of figuring things out and analyzing everything. It's not that can't help you a lot. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very interesting and very valuable to people who are working with their minds in certain ways and in certain kinds of fixes or puzzles with themselves and their relationship. I'm not saying that might not be helpful to some extent, but it's not ultimate truth. And so if you're in this room, if you're on this screen, if you're interested, this is about realizing your ultimate nature, not just the relative success and failure mind of the ego or of materialism. I'm not against that. It has its place. We need it. If you're going to make a living, you're going to have to do some of that. But when it comes to the interaction between yourself or anyone else and your partner or your family or your Sangha member, your community, your teacher, receive what comes from out here and receive what comes from in here as a reaction to what you're receiving out here. As much as you can, receive it. Be responsible. There isn't anything but the ox. Don't shift anything. Receive it. It can be heartbreaking to fundamentally do this and realize you're responsible for everything. How does that look as a story? Well, it won't work because we've got hundreds, thousands, billions of people, and this one person, as Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, Joe Schmidt, I think he used that name all the time to talk about Mr. Every Guy, is not responsible for everything, relatively. But ultimately, yes, because that's what you're looking at, that's what you're headed for, that's what you're, when there's the intention to be with all things, when there's the intention to save all beings, and lead your life according to the Bodhisattva vow, the path of the Mahayana, and you're not going to get a lot of reference points out there in the darkness. If you want to find light, look at the darkness. Fundamental dualism doesn't mean look at evil to see good. Just, I want to warn you, don't bring that up to me. Further question, especially the questions, go back into something that I have not clarified, or if you feel like I've muddied the water on something like that. So let's look at that mud. That's what I'm here to do, insofar as I'm able. Is there more mud somewhere? Let's see who's on the other screen hiding out. Nobody's hiding there. Yes. Suzanne.
What does it look like to take responsibility for those machinations, that conditionality?
To realize that it is your mind stream. That's what it looks like. It looks uncomfortable, more than likely, and it looks like it could go the other direction, and you make you the blame, which might help a little bit. It's all me. It's like they even say, drive all blames into one. Drive all blames into everything is yours. But that's a little bit different than being responsible for machinations in your mind. Just whatever shows up in your mind, it's yours. It's not the ego. Doesn't belong to the ego. It's just part of the consciousness that is showing up. It's like if you argue with what shows up in your mind, it's like arguing with your nose. Or it's like arguing, it's not exactly, but it's like arguing with the digestive tract. Because you have no say-so over the mind. If you think you do, go ahead. Think that all you want. Most of the world is operating that way. They're thinking about. If you watch Tony Robbins, he will sell you a whole bill of goods on, which may look really good. I mean, if it's a bill of goods, it probably does look good. And about how to, was it Jordan Peterson? Is that another fellow on YouTube or something that is extremely smart at making it look like he knows more than you? Have you noticed that? Does it feel like he knows more than you? No. You think he does? Good response. I'm just saying that be responsible for what arises in your mind, and the warfare is over. Just receive it. That's how you do it. Just receive it. If it shows up, it has a ticket to ride. It has a right to be here because it's dependently arisen. Because karma, our action, this caused that, is endless, and it's all over the place. And the illusion, that is a delusion. Let's do it this way. The delusion is you think you are somebody going somewhere, being something, getting something done, not getting something done, being responsible, not being responsible. That's the delusion that you can win or lose. And the ultimate polarity that we believe in, that there's a difference between life and death. And there's not. But don't believe me. Look for yourself. See it yourself. If you see that this is a delusion, then you see that the reason you're deluded about it is you believe in something that is an illusion, that is unreal. Can I say that with a higher pitched voice? It's unreal. It's unreal. It doesn't mean it isn't there. It's just like sometimes use the example of a scary movie. I often talk about Stephen King. His movies are pretty scary, and it's hard to kind of look away from those, even though you know it's a movie. It's difficult. This is a movie. This is a pretend.
Since you're bowing, I feel like I have very little control over how I respond.
I agree with you.
Do we have control?
No, that's why you're so cool. Really, you hardly have an opinion on anything, but you can generate an opinion if you need one. I've noticed you do that. But even if you do that, you change your mind right after you generate it, don't you? Quite often. Does it feel like I'm mocking you? I'm not. No, I'm just saying that being able to live in that state of mind that just doesn't lock down on anything, but if you do, it's a relative situation that shows up. This doesn't mean that you don't suffer or you don't believe your thoughts and get trapped in some kind of circularity where you're blaming maybe me or blaming Rumi or blaming Eric. I've seen you do that many times. Or blaming, who's that guy you're married to? Where is he at? But it isn't that you won't do that. I've said this many times, I'll say it again. It's about being aware of what you're doing. Then, because of dependent origination, if you're really aware, then it will, if it needs to come apart, it will. And if it needs to persist for 6 more months or 6 more years, it means that your time with that situation is not over yet. So you've seen what it is, that no one is to blame for anything. All dharmas, anything that happens is without a singular cause, including human beings. That doesn't mean that someone who is it's all about controlling everybody and getting rid of their own suffering by torturing others. That's been happening since there have been human beings. So that's happening also. And we have some control, but when we say I can move this from here, I can put it up on the altar, so I have control. So we're always doing things that are kind of reinforcing our belief in a body that can do this and not do that, run over here and not run over here, go to sleep, stay awake, eat this, not eat this. All of the various things that give us a little bit of credential all the time in every direction, that it gives us the illusion that we have some control. We do have some, of course, but we tend to go overboard when we start blaming others and ourselves for the outcome of anything. Do you have a question? What was it?
Do we have any control
No.
over how we respond?
No. Well, yeah. So what part of that is the illusion and what part is the delusion? Do we have control or not? What do you think? Yeah, what happens is when it comes right down to it and we need to control something that is circular and doing loop-de-loops everywhere, we find out that we really can't control that. Take the simple example of just your emotions. If this happens, that happens, and someone triggers something in you and you start to have negative emotions, or for that matter, positive emotions about something, you have no say-so about those. Maybe a tiny bit, but not much. We're really at the mercy of our emotions and our thoughts. That's the very nature of ego. Exciting, huh? Disappointing. It's difficult. That's why we have a spiritual path. That's why this person and other people here are dedicating themselves to training their minds, our minds, so that we can not add to the chaos in the world or the chaos in our own mind. No more war with anything. No more fighting with anything. And if you do fight, then just observe the fighting without trying to stop it. That's more war. It's a very confusing area, because the idea is there that you can't let that happen. So we'll start talking to ourselves. I can't let that happen because that would be wrong, or I could stop that. And of course, situationally, there are going to be times when you're going to need to get up and actually put a stop to something. Just like with Rumi. Rumi has a lot of freedom, but he's 4. So you can't let him have very much freedom. It's situational. Let him have some. More? Further questions? Don't rub your nose, because it'll look like you have a question. Anyone on Zoom? We have 31 people. 2 people just left, so somebody got what I was saying and left. But the rest of you are still here. Yes, sir.
Yoka bowing. Does the ability to respond involve no response?
You could, but there will always be, if something is happening or occurring, it has the appearance of this going here, this moving over there. Because if that isn't happening, then nothing is happening. But if something is going on, we look at that situation as clearly as we can without adding our opinions, our judgments, and our accusations or our finger pointing to it. Give it a chance to be what it is. That doesn't mean that if someone is attacking someone else and you're in a position to maybe intercept that you wouldn't step right into that. You might. But you might also look and see how big they are. Is there a weapon? I'm just making up a story here. There's so many variables and incredible variables. They're not even knowing what the disagreement is about. But yes, there's a possibility of just watching that to see what it fundamentally is, if it requires you to step into it, or if it's going to dissipate on its own. Receive, 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 so that you can fundamentally see through your projections about it into what it actually is. Might work, might not.
Is wanting to respond my projections?
Perhaps, or feeling like I need to do something about this. Perhaps. It may not be that important. We can always invent stories. And if you don't respond in a given situation, someone observing that might make up a story that you missed your chance to help that person, and you're terrible, or something like that. You could get blamed for not doing what other people think you should be doing. Come on, Sokuzan, give me a question.
I don't have one at the moment, thank you, though.
Okay. Let's see, who else can I pick on here?
Isaac Bowing.
Oh, Isaac, I don't even have to pick on you. Go ahead.
What does it mean for two polarities to arise at the same time?
Well, it's basic. One of the basic teachings in Buddhism is conflicting emotions about the nature of what this is. People will even say it in their mind or in their conversation. Say, "Well, I really want to take this job over here, but then a part of me wants to stay with the job I already have," and so we have all of these trying to sort things out, trying to figure out, calculate. It's not that you can't have some relative success doing that. Of course you can. But we may not see what that situation is fundamentally if you continue to haggle between right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, trying to make the right choice. You might want to wait and see if there is a choice there. So I'm not sure if I got close to what you're wanting to know. If not, ask me again.
Isaac Bowing, you say wisdom and confusion arise together.
Yes.
Does that mean at the same time, Bowing?
Yes.
Isaac Bowing, I'm still confused. I don't know what to ask.
Well, that's the wisdom. But just receive that. Receive. No. I sometimes say. I used to say years ago. I would say it practically every time I gave a Dharma talk, but I haven't said it lately because I just think that may be more confusing to people. But I might say, "How do you think I feel? I haven't figured anything out. I don't know anything. I don't teach out of what I know. I teach out of what I'm looking at. And I don't see the separation that is confusing most people. Nor do I see everything is together and everything is one. And I'm just fine being there. That doesn't mean that the emotions that run through my mind stream aren't sometimes extremely painful or challenging. They can be. but I don't do much with them. I do what I'm telling you to do right now, or suggesting you do, is just be with all things. Whatever shows up in the mind stream, it's yours. It has a right to be there, no matter what the story is behind it. That the ego mind, if it's still functioning there, is continually making up ideas about why you shouldn't feel that way, and you should feel this way, and you should stop doing that. You have a responsibility to do this, and it's on and on and on. It's a constant barrage of self-lectures or something like that. Here's a question from Mahesh. And I'm trying to understand Dogen's being time, especially when he says time is not different from this being. If we think of time as a separate entity from ourselves, then we are going to place ourselves within that structure sequentially. Can you please explain? No, I'm not going to explain that. You can't explain Dogen. All you can do is contemplate. You're doing it. You're studying Dogen much better than I can. If you give me something specific about that, rather than just say, can you explain Dogen? I can't explain Dogen. Dogen couldn't even explain himself. That's why he talked in riddles all the time. You notice how he talked out of both sides of his mouth? He would talk about absolute truth and relative truth at the same time. And he did it over and over. All of his Genjo koan and being time, and all of those they give me a headache if I try to figure them out. That's why he talked that way, so that as you start to work with that, your self-centeredness starts to collapse, because the self-centeredness cannot enter into wisdom. Why? It's not separate from wisdom. It's not other than wisdom. There, I just explained it to you. You're welcome. Chezan, will you quit flashing that light or whatever it is you're flashing, because it's going to cause me to have does that happen when lights flash a lot?
I'm not sure why my camera's been doing that.
I think it's something you've done wrong. He's not smiling, so he probably agrees with me. Did you shut it off? Oh, stop doing that now, there. So, he said, then he also goes on, Mahesh does, he says practice and enlightenment are happening in the same moment. Can't figure that out. You can't figure Dogen out. He's not presenting you the teaching that you figure. That's for quantum physics, or that's for what is that thing you do? Say it in one word. Calculate stuff? Calculus. Use calculus? What is that math that you use? Figure-outable math? Yeah, so if you really need to figure something out, then use trigonometry. But you aren't going to be able to use logic or reason to figure out Dogen. That's why so many people are fascinated, especially highly intelligent, brilliant people are fascinated by his way of presenting the Dharma, even when it's translated out of the Japanese and into other languages, including English. Astonishing what he's able. We study his teachings every Wednesday at noon here in the monastery, and been doing it for years now. I don't know how long. When we get done with that, then we're going to study the, what is it? Eihei Koroku? Is that what they call it? Yeah, it's another big, thick book. He'd like to say a lot of stuff. So again, Mahesh, you can't figure it out. Well, what can you do? You can train your mind. Get yourself to a cushion and face the wall, and that is Buddha. He even said this: practice enlightenment. The practice is enlightenment. Can't be calculated or figured out that I know of. You're quite welcome, Mahesh. Thank you for the question. Anytime. Anytime be. I thought that was funny. Come on, you guys. Come and get me.
Ken's on bowing.
Ken's on.
If Dogen's intention isn't to help us figure out something, what is his intention? Bowing.
My understanding, I haven't talked to him, but my understanding from reading Dogen and seeing the way he uses language to point to the truth, it's to help us see that the truth is here. It's here. Drop off body and mind. He says, drop off body and mind. How do you can't do that? You can't drop it. You can't get rid of your body. He doesn't even mean that. It's the attachment to the body as somebody and the attachment to the mind as somebody. Drop that off. And what do? That helps us to see the way in which we're attached or believe in our thoughts and believe that we are somebody. We can, I'm here. I can wave this hand or I can decide not to. I've got total control of myself. I might not have control of my digestive tract. I might not have control of the blood flow or the sugar content of my bloodstream. Wait a minute, maybe I don't have control of any damn thing. You follow me? Go ahead, you.
I understand what you're saying about his intention to help us see that the truth is here, but how are his words leading us in that direction?
By contemplating, just like Mahesh. I don't know, I haven't talked to Mahesh personally, but it's a valid inquiry about being time. So it brings the intellect and the intuition and consciousness itself. It starts because it doesn't spell something out in such a way that you can go in there and start to dismantle or deconstruct the whole thing as if it were some kind of a problem or an issue. He actually talks about it with the concepts and structures and language, but what he's talking about is ineffable. You can't find it, but we look for it anyway. And when we look for it, it's just like it says in the sutras in different ways. Different sutras say it in different ways, encouraging us to look closely so we can see that everything is empty of what your perceptions of it, of what your conclusions are. It's empty of that. It's done with the mind, and each person has Buddha nature. How do I know? I don't know. It's not a relative thing. I don't have proof of anything, but I'm looking at it. More? No? Why not?
I feel like I got something to chew on there.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Chewbacca. Next question. Or should I just bow out? Chazan, you have problems at your house. Those flashing lights, I think, are ghosts.
Susan bowing.
Go ahead, Susan.
Is shikantaza responsibility? Bowing.
Yes. It is. Sit down, hold still. Just receive this. Start with your own mind. Sit down and look at the wall, and you're not going to find out anything there other than the nature of consciousness. And you get to do it yourself. You get to discover this yourself. And it's not a credential. You can't pack it up and sell it in the marketplace or on TikTok or YouTube or wherever. You might. I think there are people who do that. Come up with a bright idea about the nature of this or that or consciousness and market it. You can do that if they want. Further questions, Susan?
Susan bowing. Are vows responsibility?
So you're getting into an area where there's only there's only one end to the vowel, and that's the vowel, and there's no accomplishment. It's like example I've heard before and used a little bit is all the muscles in the body. One of the muscles it's only fastened in one place. You know what that is? That's the tongue. Fastened one place. The vowel is only fastened one place. So that's why you have to extend that. So I guess there's some responsibility there, because it is the desire, the wish, or the motivation to save all beings, which is an idealistic way of saying it, since there aren't any beings. But that's something that would be realized on the path as you endeavor to do that. Don't believe anything I'm saying. As I say often, practically every Dharma talk, I'll say that at least once. I would like you to see this. And if you see it, then you certainly won't need me. You won't need anything. There will be no demands. Nothing will be left out. Nothing is unfinished. Everything is complete. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is the fancy word. Why do they use such a fancy combination of words to say something as you say enlightenment? I don't know. Chisho, why do they use those fancy words? Don't know. Anuttara, none farther. Isn't that true? And none farther. No, there's no farther awakening than Anuttara. Well, it's like there isn't anything else but this, and it's awakening. And if you realize this, you will know it. There will be no proof. It will not be an event. It may have aspects that are experiential, but it isn't something that occurs. If it occurs, it'll show up and go away, like relative truth always does. You have an insight, you have a kensho, and your true nature won't last. I don't care how incredible your kensho is. I've had a few of those myself, many, many years ago. In the 1920s, I had kensho. It was great. I knew everything, and I could see so clearly, and I understood reality, and I was one with everything. And then that life went away, and now I'm back to this one. Is there a final question? If there is, I'd be happy to respond to it.
Mahesh Bhavan.
Mahesh, go ahead.
So when you say just observe, right? Like when whatever happens in our life,
yes,
just observe. I don't think you mean like be passive. I mean, we sometimes, because obviously we have to act. How do we know like whether what we are acting out is the right way or not? If you're observing, like I might act out based on my habitual reactions and my karmic nature.
Okay, so Mahesh, let me ask you a little question. Do you practice sitting meditation?
Yeah.
And do you practice with your eyes open?
Yes.
Okay. Do you happen to practice the way that I teach?
It's a just sitting style, yeah. Keep letting go of thoughts, just sit and keep letting go of thoughts.
Okay.
Without any object, yeah.
Okay, so just very simple, just receiving everything that shows up. That?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Just continue to do that. Return here if this is helpful to you. You can return here. You can return to sitting situation on your own. Well, I'm sure you have a wall. Sit down, hold still, look at the wall, gaze at the wall. Don't stare at it, but just gaze at the wall. A soft gaze at the wall, and watch what. If you can hold very still and symmetrical, then anything that arises in the mind stream, practice watching it without adding or subtracting or dividing. In other words, no passion.
So just to clarify, my question is about in daily life. In daily life, when we are asked to observe.
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to respond. You ready to listen?
Yeah.
Okay. Just practice when you're facing the wall. When you get up off the cushion, just hang out. Don't do any meditation in action. This comes from doing this for half a century. It's not something I was taught. I was taught totally the opposite of that. But I can't help this. I cannot help but teach out of what I'm looking at. And so what I'm looking at is nothing is separate from anything else. And it's an astonishing perception that is not particularly experiential, because there isn't anyone left to experience it. It's not that I'm puffing myself up as some great sage or wise guy or wise person, but I'm just saying, when you're sitting, be very, very definite. Sit down, hold still for long periods of time without being rigid and without being macho. If you need to get up, if your knees hurt, you listen to your knees. If your back hurts, listen to it. Get up, stretch, move around, go lay down, take a nap. If you're falling asleep, take a nap, or just watch yourself go to sleep. That's also awareness practice. But when you get off the cushion, this is called, so we can define it, this is called post-meditation. Just hang out. Don't be correcting yourself in post-meditation, trying to be a better meditator, or trying to be more aware. If you practice on the wall, if you sharpen the blade enough on the whetstone or the wall, when you get up and go into your everyday life, or you take that knife and go to chop carrots or vegetables or whatever you're chopping, then you'll be able to chop. It'll be a clean cut without a lot of ragged edges. It'll be just a way of talking about prajna or wisdom. It's a clean, the symbol for Manjushri's sword has two edges that cuts through the self and through the other with one cut. Of course, that's impossible to do, but only if it's limited by relative truth. If it's not limited by anything, then every cut is wisdom, and through this and something else. So then it becomes perception only. That will begin to show up in your everyday life, probably somewhat on the cushion, but really where it really shows up is when you start bringing that mind training into interaction with your family, your society, your own mind. As you're brushing your teeth, you suddenly realize that what this is. You see, this is unreal, and it's, you don't have to listen to me to be convinced of it. You begin to see it. It just takes one hell of a lot of sitting to get that blade so that it's sharp, so that when you go into your everyday life, you're cutting through self and other, empty of self, empty of other, and completely full of what this is, which is astonishing. And it's not going to help me to rave about stuff, but you can see this. You can see this. I know you can. If you have further questions, please let me have them.
Yeah. So in real life, is there any so as per what I understand, you're saying just hang out or just don't overthink, just live normally. But what about precepts or living in the right way, or not acting out of habitual ways? Do we watch out for those? I mean, or do we do anything specific for those? Or
Yes, we're certainly going to look at that. It doesn't mean that it's a free for all and you do whatever you want to do. No, and if you were to come here, which I'm not inviting you particularly, but if you were to function out of the 16 precepts, then yes, don't kill, don't steal, don't tell lies, don't, lots of don'ts, and also refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So you're pulling yourself away from your everyday life to some extent. But in the West, we're not in ancient Japan or Tibet or China. In the West, or where we're at here, we're trying to find out how to use the Buddha's Dharma and still not abandon our culture. So this is something, Trungpa Rinpoche came from Tibet and came to England, Scotland, and then eventually came here and endeavored to create an enlightened society. I think he had some success. It wasn't over the top successful, but he had some success with that into introducing people into a way of living that was based on basic sanity, on not going to war with anything, but first being respectful of people's confusion and their awakening. And he was my teacher. He was my guru. And he was my guru until I met Kobanchina Roshi, who was my Zen master. They didn't know that, but I did. Final question from anyone, then we'll actually make this a final one since it's getting late. No? Okay, we'll close then. Thank you. And thank you, Mahesh, for joining us and asking questions.